Okay, team, it said the stream shut down when I came to look at it just now, so I'll give everyone a couple minutes to get in the door. Don't know what happened, Internet stuff, internet. We're in a new location. Did anyone, I don't know, I'm going to give you the view just because we're not sure if the stream collapsed before, but pretty good sunrise today. We're not doing too poorly. It was pink earlier. That's the CN Tower. We are indeed in Toronto for Halloween. And let me make sure Rumble is working because I'm not sure it is. Never sure about the Rumble situation. It's been working okay lately. I haven't seen it be any trouble, but we'll see. We don't know exactly. We don't exactly know. Okay. We're ready. Everyone, the sun is up. We saw it. It came up. I checked. Bitcoin's running. We're happy. We can have our coffee and talk about all the news. I had to do Starbucks again today. I don't mind Starbucks as much as I was on an anti-Starbucks crusade for a little while, but I don't care anymore. It's not bad. I've been getting the espresso macchiatos, not the cortado. They don't know what a cortado is there, apparently, which is crazy. So cortado, if you don't know what it is, it's a espresso with a little bit of milk in it. It's not a latte. It's like mostly still espresso, but I love it. It's my drink. So fakest news of the day, of course, everyone's talking about it. It's hilarious. Elon Musk retweeting or commenting on a Hillary Clinton tweet. Now, he's since taken it down, but nevertheless, it's a work of art. And if you don't know the details, let me explain it to you. So Hillary came out and tweeted, "The Republican Party and its mouthpieces now regularly spread hate and deranged conspiracy theories. It is shocking but not surprising that violence is the result. As citizens, we must hold them accountable for their words and their actions." And she was retweeting the Los Angeles Times story about accused Pelosi attacker David DePape spread QAnon, other far-right conspiracies. So this is the whole big debate that's going on Twitter right now. Everyone's fighting about who is the guy who attacked Pelosi's husband, what was going on at the time, and we don't know, and everyone's fighting about it. But here's what Elon Musk did, which makes it one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. So he ended up, within her tweet, he commented, "There might be more to the story than we realize." And he included a purely fake news story that was taken down about gay lovers, and the wife didn't know. I never even saw it. It was fake news and was taken down immediately, but he'd used a screenshot, so he was able to get it to circulate. But here's the setup, right? She's clearly spreading fake news, and we'll get to that in a second. So she's clearly spreading fake news. He comes in, and instead of arguing it, right? Oh, but that's not, it's not exactly like that, and something else. He tweets fake news alongside it. That's tangentially related to everything. But here's what happens. Everyone ends up talking about what he replied. And everyone thinks they do, the typical journalist. It's gotcha journalism, gotcha, right? You had The Guardian saying, Musk posts baseless conspiracy theory about Paul Pelosi attack on Twitter. You've got a bunch of reactions along the same lines. Aaron Rupar, well, I'll get to that in a second. So you've got the New York Times, right? Elon even tweets this, the New York Times headline, "Elon Musk in a tweet shares a link from site known to publish false news." Elon replies to them, "This is fake. I did not tweet a link from the New York Times." So he's basically just smashing all of these folks in the face. And this is what makes it funny, right? So in a normal way, you would hear an argument and then you go, well, it's your defenses are up, you're not paying attention. And we get back into these solitudes, right? We talk a lot about how, and this was one of the most amazing graphics I saw in the 2016 election. And I didn't realize what a problem it was with the echo chamber situation until then. But if you remember in the 2016 election, they showed how everyone's tweets were really coupled within their world, and hardly anything went on the other side, right? And hardly anything penetrates. That's why both groups, Republicans and Democrats, suffer from heavy doses of broken brains because of the amount of fake news they're ingesting. It literally hurts your IQ. Like it can lower your actual mental capacity to fall for this stuff all the time. And what we saw in 2016 is people were being pushed to the extremes. Now, it's on both sides. And when you're in opposition, it gets worse, right? So Republicans under the Obama administration were being fed the most amount of fake news because it was a way to keep engagement up, keep anger at the incumbent group. And then the model, that was Fox doing it, pumping a lot of Republicans with fake news in order to get them motivated. And that's where you get the whole meme that liberals have, that Fox News can just be dismissed outright because it's a fake news factory. Which, besides the entertainment part of Fox News, it's a very entertaining network. I don't watch it, but there's shows that people like, and Greg Gutfeld has wiped out the night comedy shows like Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel got rolled by Elon Musk and all of this as well. Jimmy Kimmel comes out and says, it's been great watching you grow to be the electric car guy, but now the biggest piece of shit, right? So Jimmy Kimmel. If you don't know who Jimmy Kimmel is in America, he's supposed to be the heir of these prestigious nighttime talk shows, but they used to be controversial, right? It used to be Johnny Carson, who had 1 million wives, had full personal problems, drinking, carrying on. And he would get the other actors and stars to talk about their own personal problems in a comedic sense, because people weren't judgmental. This was the 70s and 80s, and people just sort of accepted you for who you were and got on with it. But Jimmy Kimmel, of course, is a moralizer, right? So much of a moralizer that everyone's reminding him today that he did several skits on what should American hospitals do with unvaccinated people, which is basically don't treat them. Ha 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 ha! It was really funny. Ha 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 ha! It was so funny, Jimmy Kimmel. So Jimmy, instead of again, here's an Elon Musk, just brilliant. Instead of even replying to Jimmy Kimmel, he just sent a cry emoji, like one character, one character response. So, right. But going back to the Hillary Clinton piece, right? So it would be one thing to argue with her, much more clever to share a piece of fake news so that right away your mind is now fake news, fake news. It's not, you can't argue fake news and a lie with the truth. She knows what she's doing, right? She's lying, right? She knows. So instead of saying, oh, did you know that you're not telling the truth? What he does is he just copies her, right? He models exactly what she's doing. So now you understand better the context of how he saw what she was doing. And getting the New York Times, the Guardian, all of these big newspapers that first of all, they don't understand a joke, right? The lack of humor is enough to understand their own limitations. But they don't understand jokes. There's no joking apparently allowed. So they have to run it all serious, right? And they've got to run it that it's so serious that he's an idiot, basically. It's the old idiot move again, right? You're dumb. Look how stupid Trump is, right? Look how stupid Elon Musk is. He's retweeting fake news without understanding that it is a glorious work of art. It's a work of art, this kind of trolling. You can't teach trolling this good. You can't, right? It's not possible. This is top of the line, world-class trolling. The best we've ever seen. And the most persuasive, because remember, we talked about those 2016 two solitudes and information only bubbling within these two, within these two bubbles. And then the issue then, of course, becomes you're just a victim to fake news and all those other things. So he found a way to shoot over the walls, right? This is advanced artillery that we're dealing with here, right? Over the walls and bam, direct hit. I see direct hit. Because now everyone's saying, well, what does this have to do? Right? What's going on here? So everyone's talking about it. Morning, Justin. Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. I'm doing great, Roxanne. I love life. Is that how I pronounce it? Roxanne? Yeah, I think so. Roxanne. I love life, guys. I love life. And, we've always got to we'll do a second morning coffee sip to the beautiful birthday that Satoshi's paper is enjoying today, right? It's, you noticed yesterday I did the thing. I put up a board and I was comparing the simulation and the coincidences of the separation of church and state enjoying October 31st as the day Martin Luther posted the note on the wall, the door of the church saying, the Bible is enough, pray to God directly, don't deal with third-party intermediaries, and you can have eternal life, right? So that's what happened in 1517 today. And in 2008, stupidly, I don't know why I put 2009. That was an old picture. That was from a video I recorded a year ago today. And I just never noticed the mistake for an entire year. Anyway, at least I told the story about being in Japan in 2008 correctly. I was in Japan in 2008, October 31st at a Halloween party. So we've had now our 14th birthday for the beautiful white paper. And we're going to talk a bit about today how that white paper can heal people's brains. We're going to keep on the subject of Hillary's broken brain and Jimmy Kimmel's broken brain. Well, Hillary, we can't say her brain is broken because I'm not a mind reader, but I'm pretty sure it was premeditated. Like she knows what she's doing, right? So I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a mind reader. Morning, Christian. Morning, Christian. Today we're going to talk about the elements of cognitive dissonance because they are on display today, right? Cognitive dissonance. Now, the way to understand cognitive dissonance is not that your brain is holding, not that you have several thoughts in your brain and it's confusing. It really is that you're holding two thoughts that contradict each other and forces your brain into a position that is no longer logical, that makes no sense, but follows certain patterns. Right? These are the patterns that prove cognitive dissonance is happening, and these are the basically mitigating factors. This is how you know and you can diagnose and recognize in the wild cognitive dissonance, right? And it really follows these four patterns. You can deny it, you can reduce the importance of things, you can add importance to certain elements, or you can change your mind, and we're going to get to that in the end. But right away today, we can talk about what we saw with this whole Pelosi story, because all of these different factors are on display today. So in denial, right? In denial. Here's a fella named Luke Zaleski. Luke Zaleski. He's the legal affairs editor at Condé Nast. He's a longtime former researcher and director of GQ magazine, and he's the head of fact-checking. Right? He's a fact-checker. So this is one, he's featured sort of prominently in this, so you're going to hear him a few times. Here's one where he comes out and says, there's a fellow named Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh D'Souza is also a entertainer. I wouldn't call him a newsmaker. He makes documentaries. 100% of documentaries are fake news, even if they're correct. And what I mean by that is they're not intended, no documentary is intended to give you the tools to understand something on your own. All documentaries are persuasive. That's the point of a documentary. They have a purpose and they're trying to get to the point. So fake news is probably far, but they're not this tool that you can get information and then make your own decision. Right? You can go watch any one of those documentaries on Michael Jackson to understand what I mean. You can watch one of the documentaries on Michael. I don't remember, they had a whole bunch that came out at once. You watch one and you say, geez, he did those things. You watch another and you say, no way he did those things, right? So most documentaries, I don't want to say all, most documentaries are designed, right, to prove a point, right? To prove a point. So Dinesh D'Souza does that. Right? And whether you agree with his points or don't agree with his points, that's not what I'm talking about here, right? We don't care. Think of it as entertainment. It might be entertainment that's sympathetic to ways you think or not, right? I treat it as entertainment and as a voice that I like to hear. His movies are, in my opinion, not great because, he did the mules one about the election stuff in the United States. It had a lot of issues. I mean, the facts were in that story all about geolocation and where people went, but there's a million reasons you could come up with that it didn't make any sense, that the people who were running votes would have been there for all kinds of reasons. They would pass a certain spot on a day and things like that. So anyway, all that to say, it's a convincing movie. Watch it, but beware. He's going to make the point so well that you might believe it, but I don't know if it's true. It might be true. I don't think it is, but he might be right. So here's what Dinesh D'Souza says. So he says, the left is going crazy because not only are we not buying the wacky, implausible Paul Pelosi story, but we are even laughing over how ridiculous it is. What this means is that we are no longer intimidated by their fake pieties. Their control over us has finally been broken. And so Luke Zaleski says, pardon me, pardon me. He gives the pardon me, really, really. But of course, he's denying what's going on here. This is a great example of denying dissonance, right? His brain here can't handle what he's hearing. This person must be a QAnon supporter. Now, how do we know? How do we know? Well, here's the best way we know so far. Michael Schellenberger, who is a prime source on this show, right? We talk about Michael Schellenberger all the time on this show. We know that, right? So if you're new to the show, go back many episodes. You're going to probably hear about Michael Schellenberger in every other episode because he's a big nuclear energy proponent. He wrote the book Apocalypse Never and outlined America's nuclear trajectory over the next X amount of years and was basically the person responsible for changing perception of nuclear energy in America through his congressional testimonies and the book. And he calls it Apocalypse Never because although he is a Sierra Club member, he's from San Francisco, he's an environmentalist, he fulfills all of the checklists that you would like, that, let's say, ultra-cultured, well-educated, more left-leaning folks, right? We can't deny that usually a lot of education, more preponderance on left-wing politics, absolutely not universal, but it's common. So, he fills the checklist. Numerous degrees, liberal arts degrees, science degrees, all those kinds of things. And Justin says, Michael is also a person who has reasoned from first principles. Yeah, he sure is, right? But here's the story. I don't know if any of you guys realize this. The boots on the ground for the DePape case is Michael Schellenberger. He went to DePape's house. He's the only one who did it. He did it. He himself went to the house. Now, he has these skills. It might sound like, what's this nuclear energy guy doing? Well, he ran for governor in California, and we covered the campaign, and we were big advocates and thought he was actually going to beat Newsom, but we were totally wrong, and he didn't even get past the first tour, and, it was a disaster. So, but I think he'll keep coming, and he'll go again. It was an independent candidacy, right? He runs as an independent because he's not a Republican, so he runs as an independent. And what he tried to do is, now, if you know the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, right? London Breed is her name. Very left-leaning, as you can imagine. She ended up about a year ago adopting all of Michael Schellenberger's policies because he wrote a book called San Francisco. And it's all about drug rehabilitation, how to enforce policing in these environments. He did a lot of research and had a real prescriptive measurement. And London Breed ended up following a lot of it. So it's not a defund the police argument. It's a very sophisticated argument about how to handle drug addiction, not to cure them necessarily, right? Give them the tools that it could be cured, but he's treating it as a public health issue. Just that's it, right? That's it. So he ended up running for governor of California. And one of his campaign tricks to get attention that no other campaigner ever did, and I watched them all, is he would just go and talk to the drug dealers, the drug addicts in all of these cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and he would just record it, put it on YouTube. And the stuff you found was unbelievable. These images that are fed to people of drug dealers or drug addicts in these places being victims. You had guys that he would interview that had no problem selling crystal meth to children. Like, he has it on video, right? Now, I always say don't believe videos, right? But in this case, this is a first person. It's not hearsay. It's him taking the video and showing you what he's seeing. So Schellenberger went to the guy's house. The pictures we have of the house were taken by Schellenberger himself. The FBI ended up going later, but here's what he found, right? So the media are portraying the suspect in the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband as a man fundamentally driven by right-wing ideology. But it's obvious to anyone who looks at what drove David DePape to violence was drug-induced paranoid psychosis. And so he goes there and says, what I know about the family is that they're very radical activists. They seem very left. They're all about Black Lives Matter, gay pride, but they're very detached from reality. They have called the cops on several of the neighbors, including us. It's really weird to see that they're willing to be so aggressive towards somebody else who is also on the left wing. A closer look reveals the characteristics of a homeless encampment, or what Europeans called an open drug scene. In the driveway, there's a broken down camper van. On the street is a yellow school bus, which neighbors said DePape occasionally stayed in. Both are filled with garbage, typical of such structures in homeless encampments. So neighbors described DePape as a homeless drug addict with politics that were, until recently, left-wing, but of secondary importance to the psychotic and paranoid behavior. So what we ended up finding is a lot of the QAnon right-wing stuff was actually planted in that. That's what he found, right? Now I don't know. I didn't do research, so I don't know. I don't know about DePape's social media posting history. I don't know anything about it. I know what Schellenberger said, right? That everything that came and was posted was done in the last hours and days. Brand new stuff, right? And so what he ends up saying is much of the media were swept up in the narrative that DePape was more like a John Wilkes Booth, the fanatical, sane assassin of Abraham Lincoln, than John Hinckley Jr., the mentally ill man who shot Ronald Reagan. In truth, DePape is much more like one of the hundreds of psychotic people I've interviewed in recent years than the fanatical climate ideologues who've been writing about in recent weeks. Wrapped up in their obsession with MAGA Republicans, journalists have missed the real story. David DePape is not a microcosm of the political psychosis gripping America in general. Rather, he's a microcosm of the drug-induced psychosis gripping the West Coast in particular. Right? And they have other stories. He talks to angels. He's had all these kinds of things. And then just look at his basic, life, right? She's worked with DePape in making hemp bracelets. They lived out of a storage shed. All these types of things, right? And I think there's even one more that I had here that was relevant to it. Let's see. Oh yeah. Here's an interview from a friend, right? She noted that DePape's politics were right-wing. Well, when I met him, he was only 20 years old and didn't have any experience in politics. And he was very much in alignment with my views, and I've always been very progressive. So we're not trying to prove one or the other. I don't think that's even necessary. What we're trying to do is show that what Michael Schellenberger did was real, on the boots, going to have a look, doing some investigative journalism, even though he's not a journalist, right? Even though he's not a journalist, he went and saw it, right? So we've already seen that you can do what our friend Luke Zelensky here did and just deny this, right? You can deny the thing that happened, but there's another way. You can reduce the importance of things, right? Shrinking the importance of things. And here's what happened, right? Here's what happened. From the very get-go, you had folks, let me see what my reduce importance is. Deny. Sorry about these notes. Oh, here it is. Good. So here's the reduce importance piece. You had all kinds of folks, right? All kinds of folks that were saying, what he did there doesn't make any sense. You've got Aaron Rupar. Aaron Rupar is the journalist from CNN who is notorious for clipping the Charlottesville hoax clip. If you watch the Charlottesville thing with Trump, right? If you watch the Charlottesville video, you'll understand that the very fine people, or the fine people, or whatever he said, right, came after he had just said, I condemn those people entirely. Right? I can condemn the white supremacists entirely, right? So what the president at the time was trying to say was, there's a whole group of people that I condemn entirely, There were other people there who weren't like them, left and right, that were there, right? So the way Rupar cut the clip was he cut out all the I condemn entirely. If you go watch the clip, there's no fine people. Like, it's clear what he said, right? Yet we're still dealing with, years later, this is the most debunked hoax in the history of hoaxes. You can go see, the Wall Street Journal doesn't even say the president said that anymore because they know the debunk, right? The Wall Street Journal will correct anyone who says that Trump said very fine people. They will always, right? Because they know. Because it's been so publicly debunked, you can find the truth pretty much anywhere on the internet. And that's not the only one. There's a whole bunch of these hoaxes, right? There's a list of hoaxes. And, you know, the President Biden went out and even campaigned on this, right? So what did Aaron Rupar say? What did Aaron Rupar say? Well, Aaron Rupar decided that, let's see where I put it. Aaron Rupar decided that, geez, my notes are all out of whack today. There it is. This guy is so full of shit. As evidence that DePatt wasn't really a right-winger, he cites a blog post from the guy published 15 years ago. His article goes on to painstaking lengths to engage the QAnon, plus big lie, plus bigoted stuff DePatt posted more recently. Enjoy those Fox hits. So he's basically saying that, he went out and did it, that Schellenberger went out and did it because he wanted to get on TV. Right? That's what he's saying, right? That's what. But Rupar, right? Rupar, so he's attacking Schellenberger here. He's saying that, you going there doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. But this is exactly the kind of story, right? This is exactly the kind of story that journalists in a former time when journalism was still a thing would have been one of the biggest stories, right? This is what journalists would have lived for, to dig into this kind of story, to go look and get the facts. But the issue is they ran to judge and condemn people here, right? It was a rush to condemn people and a rush to pass judgment on everything that happened without any facts. No one even went to his house yet. No one even went and saw and interviewed people. The only one to do it is our nuclear proponent on our show. This show, all right? We talk about Michael Schellenberger because of his nuclear energy policy. He's the only guy who got off his ass and went down there and had a look. Just him, right? And so this is the kind of story that you have to dismiss his efforts, because if you look at his efforts as actual boots on the ground journalism, then you've got to accept that he found out and uncovered information. So what Rupar is doing here is just focusing on the more recent stuff, but the more recent stuff is it's not clear that it's real. We know that. It's not clear it's real. Right? We don't know. We don't know. Right? I'm not going to tell you it's fake. We don't know it's real. That's the world we live in today. Right? We can't just assume something is real. We can't. Right? We have to ask questions. Schellenberger went to the guy's house. Did it sound like any of these things fit? Now, the drug, he's not saying Republican QAnon. He's saying he's full of drugs. Right? So Rupar is instantly reducing the importance of the fentanyl, the drugs, all that stuff. Don't look here, right? He's definitely right-wing, right? But remember, Aaron Rupar, in particular, Aaron Rupar, is one of the biggest fake news merchants on earth. He is at the source of many hoaxes. So you have to treat him as one of the least credible people in the world. You have to. And here, this is what having a broken brain looks like, right? He can't look at a journalist actually doing their job. He's got to reduce it to nothing, right? This next one here, add importance. This is actually one of the biggest tells and something that happens all the time. And we've got some amazing examples. In particular, the President of the United States, right? The President of the United States. We mentioned earlier, he still believes the Charlottesville hoax, right? He said that's why he ran. He said he ran because of Charlottesville. That's why he ran, right? Here's what he says today. The Pelosi attacker used the same chant as the January 6th protesters. What? He used the same chant? Did he? I was told there's no video. I haven't seen video of what happened there yet. How do we know what he even said? We don't know. It's made up. It's completely invented. So one way to diagnose cognitive dissonance is hallucinations. If someone is hallucinating something that isn't there, and there's a debate about the thing happened fake or not, and one person sees something that wasn't there, right? One person sees something that wasn't there, adds something to it, right? Subtracting something, saying something wasn't there, little more believable, right? That can be an honest mistake, you didn't notice, but literally adding something to a scene, adding something to a picture, always cognitive dissonance, always. You could be wrong, not the same thing, right? A chant, who chanted what? Where's the chant coming from? There's no chant. There's no chant. There was never a chant. So the president adding information here is pure cognitive dissonance, right? Now you can see that this Luke Zaleski guy did not stop there, right? He did some denying, right? But adding importance, here's where he goes on to add so much importance, right? Now you can understand when people add things that it stops making sense. So one of the ways to diagnose cognitive dissonance is each of these end up coming out like gibberish. It doesn't make any sense, right? So here's what he's saying. Here's what he's saying. He's commenting on all of this stuff, right? Here's what he says to explain it all, to explain Elon Musk replying to Hillary Clinton and the context and da-da-da. He says, one of the ways male supremacy is preserved is through the condescension of those who act like everyone else is always overreacting to everything. Let me repeat that. This is a thought that came out of a legal analyst's mind. A legal analyst. This came out of his brain. Now, look at what's going on out there with Elon and all this stuff and tell me if this makes any sense. One of the ways male supremacy, so male supremacy is preserved. You got to preserve male supremacy, I guess. You do it by being condescending to those who act like everyone else. I can't even make sense of it. I don't understand what he's saying. It's gibberish. One of the ways male supremacy is preserved is through the condescension of those. Okay, so they act condescending towards everyone else for overreacting. So that apparently the way male supremacy is preserved is by treating other people as hysterical, I guess, when they shouldn't be. Maybe. I mean, to me, it's a hallucination, right? It's a complete hallucination. And that's really where we see the hallucinations play out, right? We've got a whole media that didn't even bother to look. They rushed to condemn millions, 75, 80 million Trump MAGA people, right? Didn't even look, didn't even bother. So there you go. Now, you can deny, right? So you see when they deny, you see when importance is being reduced. These are the ways for the mind to get back to balance, right? That's the way out to stop the pain of cognitive dissonance because it causes pain. We all get it, by the way, right? There's no immunity to cognitive dissonance. The reason is your brain wants the dopamine, right? Your brain wants the dopamine. And the operating system that we are on is to train ourselves like dogs or anything else, right? That we'll get the thing we want, right? The response. We'll get the thing we want. We can get addicted to the pleasure reward system that comes from dopamine. And when you have cognitive dissonance, it's kind of like you feel it in your stomach, actually. It can feel like anger. You ever want to punch someone? That's a type of cognitive dissonance, right? You ever got so angry? That's cognitive dissonance. That's what it feels like. We all get it. I'm not immune. You can know about it and not know you have it. That's the thing about cognitive dissonance. You're the only one who doesn't know. So you've always got to ask yourself, it could be me. I could be wrong. I don't, maybe, right? But the best way then to check is to see who else is feeling that way and check against your predictions. Like, are things going the way I thought they would go? And you got to be honest, right? If they're different, then it might be you that has cognitive dissonance. That's why we make this show about predicting. The whole point of this show is to make predictions and come back and check them. We make a prediction, we come back and check it. And that way we know if we had an accurate worldview at the time and whether or not we're suffering from cognitive dissonance, right? If you're on schedule, if the world is proceeding according to the predictions you made and the threads that you said would extend into the future, then you're probably safe, right? But remember that your brain will try to contort the world into your view, right? That's just the way it works. That's the operating system. You can't ask a operating system to do other than what it's designed to do. and we are risk reward, pain reward creatures, right? We train ourselves to understand. We get something good for doing this. We get something bad for doing that. And then when you don't get what you're supposed to get, right, you can get angry, right? You can get angry, and that's where the cognitive dissonance comes from. And then the way we check it is denial, right? We can see if someone's denying the dissonance, denying the fact that would give them the dissonance, right? We showed that with Zaleski just basically saying, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? You people don't care about the media anymore. You're immune to it because of this story. It's crazy, right? You can reduce the importance, right? We showed how no one cared that Schellenberger actually did journalism. Journalists didn't care that a non-journalist did journalism. It didn't matter, right? Rush to condemn. Add importance. The president said they had a chant. He had a chant. The January 6th chant was also in the House. Don't think so, right? But now we come to things that aren't about sex, gay hammers, and hitting someone in the head with a dildo or anything like that, right? We're now in the only real way out of cognitive dissonance is to change your mind, right? And boy, are people's minds about to get changed. So this comes from Germany, right? This is from, don't know the Times in England, right? So October 31st, 2022, German pension system is near collapse. All right. We've got the hyperinflation, or the inflation chart coming out of the EU region. It's 16.8 in the Netherlands, came out today. The Eurozone as a totality is at 10.7%, which is the highest ever recorded. They've never had a higher recorded inflation within the Eurozone. So that's number one now. And you've got Credit Suisse, right? Credit Suisse. They had to ask 20 banks for a capital increase. Goldman, Citi, JP Morgan, Banque Nationale Paribas, all joined a consortium, and they raised $4 billion, or they're going to raise $4 billion for a restructuring plan. Now, you remember 2 weeks ago, the New York Times was doing a denial, right? They claimed there was nothing wrong at Credit Suisse. Now, this is a too big to fail bank, right? So we can understand why. But they wrote articles, and we've covered them on the show, that imply the amateurs on social media, people like us, right? People like us, we're amateurs, right? We're raising a false alarm. Now, this journalist that we even went and checked their pedigree, their educational pedigree. Of course, it's a liberal arts degree, from not even like a real US Ivy League, kind of like an NYU situation. I don't care about university standards, but think about this, about central banking. We've got, and I agreed with, this was Wall Street Silver who was making those, who was doing the journalism into Credit Suisse and was predicting the trouble. And I read the New York Times article when it came out. And we talked about the New York Times article in the show, and we even described the New York Times writers' backgrounds on the show. Well, she's telling me, okay, well, I've got the liberal arts degree too. I've got a political science degree from France, right, where I went to school in France. I got a law degree, right? I went to university in Waterloo in Canada, which is kind of like the Stanford of Canada, right? It's where Vitalik, the guy who started Bitcoin magazine and Ethereum, went to school. We all talked him into quitting school while we were working here in Toronto out of the original Bitcoin ATM spot. I worked in the Senate of Canada, in the Senate Banking Committee, looking at central bank policy, bank liquidity. I ran that committee all through the financial crisis and was so far ahead of the game, I got them to study Bitcoin in 2013 and spent $1 million studying Bitcoin in 2013 as a solution to our problems, right? Not as like, oh, is it dangerous? What about the drug dealers? No. Our mandate at the time that I launched the study was to study how powerful it was. We didn't give a shit about the illegal stuff. We made a clear distinction. We mentioned it, but we recommended nothing to be done about it, right? We just said, well, it can happen, right? So apparently, and then I went on to move to New York City. I was more or less, the CoinDesk point person on all institutional Bitcoin discussions, all that stuff. I spent a lot of time in New York City in the stock exchange and the New York Stock Exchange, in all these different banks. I was the person everyone wanted to talk about Bitcoin with. I did all the mainstream media news, fake news tours, right? CNN, Squawk Box, Fox, all of the fake news. Did them all. Number go up, number go down, hack, the three main stories that we did every single time. But this journalist who had a degree in whatever, liberal arts, tells us that we're amateurs. Right? We're amateurs. Come on, we're amateurs. So you've got to reduce the importance. You got to deny. You got to add. But the changing your mind here, right? And this is where the Bitcoin stuff comes in on Bitcoin's white paper's birthday. It comes in when we start to talk about the pain, the broken brains that are about to be caused by trust in a system that is going to let most people down. We've talked a lot about the wealth transfer of the boomer generation. Well, in Europe, it's happening now. And it's happening now that the people who have worked all their lives in Germany, all their lives, they're going to spend it all keeping their houses warm for the next couple of years. Now, the countries that aren't so rich, like Czech Republic, they want the Russian energy back because they don't want to keep paying this stuff. They didn't make as much money as the Germans did, right? But the wealth transfer thing is going to go to inflation. So everything these German people thought they were going to leave their children, their legacy, it ain't going to work, right? It ain't going to work. So they have a choice, right? They have a choice. And that's what Bitcoin is going to thrive off of. That's what it's already thriving off of, right? That's why we say Bitcoin is the escape from the fake prison of two ideas. It's the escape from being caught in cognitive dissonance by everyone who wants you to be in cognitive dissonance, right? They want it on either side. They want cognitive dissonance. It's much easier to get you angry because remember, the outrage and the anger, you give yourself the dopamine through the outrage and anger because it quells the cognitive dissonance. That's why it's done this way. Denying what's happening, reducing the importance, adding the importance lets you go back on your initial assumptions. And it's a little bit like the idea of when a relationship ends, why it's so hard to move on. Well, the reason is you usually have built up in your mind a future, right? You've built these sandcastles, right? And you want them to be that you want to get there in the future. That's where you're working towards. And then all of a sudden you find out you're not building that, you're not going there. People don't like that, right? That is cognitive dissonance. That's why it's so hard, because you've got to start reprogramming your vision of the future. And Bitcoiners, right, have a much more solid vision of the future, a much more reliable one, and a much more likely one, I would say. Right? I'd say the ability for us to imagine the future gives us the inside edge on building that future because we see it so clearly. Bitcoiners see the future so clearly. That's the difference, right? If you're not a 100% in Bitcoiner, if you're still sitting there saying, well, what about the volatility of the exchange rate? We don't care about the relative price with the US dollar. It means nothing. It's a little bump in the road because Bitcoin actually allows us to tell the future. It allows us to draw the future, design the future, think about the future in a way that makes sense and a way that seems worthwhile because it's more likely than the other thing. Now, I can invent and picture a future with the US dollar. It just sucks because we got to have slaves again. There's no way it'll work without slaves. Like it can't. You can't have Cantillon effect to this extent without creating slaves, more or less slaves, right? I'm not saying there's any markets where you buy people, but I'm in Toronto right now. All these fuckers working here aren't going to be able to afford nothing to make a life here. It's too expensive. You ever watch this guy on YouTube, Cash Jordan? He's just a real estate guy, entertaining, nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with that. He's saying in New York City now, when he's going to get the first apartments, he has to do credit check on all these people. And he's saying they're not getting through with a basic Manhattan apartment of 1 bedroom. You need about 170,000 US dollars income now to afford that, to pass the credit check. $170,000 for basic living standards. The basic, right? So we can, of course, and who's making 170 in New York City? Well, it's not people who just got hired by Goldman. They're not. They gotta commute now, like everybody. They're like the street sweepers now, right? It's like presidents that make that kind of money at Goldman. It's not average people. Presidents probably too far, but it's like VPs, right? Now there's a million VPs at banks, but still, it's not trainee. Right? It's not trainee. Trainees used to be able to go work and live in Manhattan. That's finished. It's finished. So there we go. Right? There we go. Now you can even go, the coronavirus is another example, right? The coronavirus. Here's NPR on New Year's Eve last year saying things like, a new poll finds 40% of respondents believe in a baseless conspiracy theory that the coronavirus was created in a lab in China. Well, we're finding out over the last couple of days, probably was. Now, again, it's journalists, looks like they're the best. I can't explain the whole findings to you because I have such a distaste for COVID science, right? You know what I learned from COVID science? This is what I learned from all the vaccines, all the different medicines they talk about, even hydroxychloroquine and the one you're not allowed to say, right? I don't care if they work or not. No one knows. I can't tell you. No one can tell you. It should be the easiest damn thing in the world to tell us if those things worked. It should have been the easiest thing, but they never got there. What does that tell you? I think that coronavirus proves science doesn't work and that it's broken. Science is broken, right? Like the coronavirus, you're not going to convince me this science told me this drug was good and this science told me that. All of it, the vaccines, all of it. I don't care. Science was proven to be broken. That's all I learned. All I learned was, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to go and read all of these science papers and decide which one is credible and which one isn't? Who spun the results? There's a new one out right now that everyone's going on about the fungal Japanese one whose name we can't talk about that won a Nobel Prize years ago that everyone thinks is great. Well, did you read the study? It was garbage. They mailed it to the people. They fucking mailed it in the post when they started to show symptoms. Now, there's no follow-up. There was no control groups to find out, did they do it right? No one even found out if they took it on time or in the right doses. No one did any of that, right? Yet everyone on Twitter, look, the government suppressed this drug. Well, they're all wrong too, because it was a garbage study. They're all garbage. Don't look at any of them. None of it. If you see someone sharing a report about a study of science in Twitter, discount it immediately. It's just not good. Now, we can say that that's reducing the importance, but I've had enough of following these people, and it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it. So here we are on the white paper's birthday, and we see there's going to be even more broken brains coming up with the imminent financial collapse. But that's why we Bitcoin, because we have a chance here to change our mind and really start tying dopamine into saving Bitcoins. And that's the name of the game here. That's why people call it hodling, stacking sats. As we said, addiction, cognitive dissonance, that's, dopamine rewards, that's the operating system. The goal is to change what gives you dopamine. It shouldn't be, those fucking MAGA people, or even the other thing, those stupid Hillary Clinton liars. Forget both, reject them. They are fake. Give yourself the dopamine from just staying humble, stacking sats, as our friend Matt Odell says. Right? That's all you got to do. It's different. Doesn't sound as crazy, but if you can train yourself to give yourself the dopamine for doing those simple things, you're going to make it. You're not going to have a broken brain. Much better. See some comments. Yeah, so Indemnity, I knew there was a reason you were sounding super sad. Well, I mean, has this not been the greatest week of news you've ever seen? Like this, I haven't felt this great about the news since, so Justin says, Bitcoin trains us to remain critical thinkers in all aspects of life. Yeah, it does. It does. And once you understand incentives, like that's, for me with the science thing, with the medicine and the COVID and all that, I mean, look, I can admit when I don't know, and I think a lot of people should have done that when it came to COVID. We don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And that's why I continue to believe whenever here's a typical cognitive dissonance response to COVID stuff. Oh, they acted out of fear, on both sides, right? You hear, let's call it freedom people saying, yeah, it's follow the money, as Justin said, exactly that. Follow the money. Yeah, follow the money, right? You heard people say, oh, uh, they're just afraid of losing their jobs. Well, or the other side, you're afraid of the vaccine. Well, everyone was afraid. Everyone. No one made any decisions related to COVID without fear as one of the primary motivators. It's the biggest one. Fear will win against anything, right? Fear will cause you to have cognitive dissonance. Fear will cause you to make a choice, do this, do that, more than almost anything else out there, right? And unfortunately, they're not really properly risk assessing the dollar these days, right? There is no risk assessment. It's pornography. I often describe, this is one of my favorite sayings. I love it. I came up with it. I actually came up with this. You can borrow it anytime. But it explains all of Wall Street. This was my conclusion of working on Wall Street for years, right? My conclusion. They turned Wall Street into a porno. They de-risked it. They took the real risk out. It's just pornography, right? But Bitcoin's going to teach them what it's like to get for real, right? They're going to remind them that it's different than they thought. It ain't a porno. It's not porno. Not porno, right? Not porno. And I've said that a lot about how Bitcoin absorbed some of the best human capital in trading because there were early traders like Arthur Hayes, right? Like Arthur Hayes. Arthur Hayes wasn't into the porno stuff. He wanted real risk, win and lose, the real thing. And if you want the real thing, you learn how to do it. You know what I mean? So he did it. He created a real risk engine, right? 100x risk engine. Crazy, 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 crazy. Yeah, but it was the real thing. It wasn't porno. And that's what we got, We do it for real. We do it for real. All right, team. Oh, Justin, yesterday it was, this is what the science is telling us. Don't question it. Today it's, the science has changed. You can't blame us. Yeah, I mean, look, science as a concept is broken. It's broken, right? You can say, we're going to have to rediscover it, right? We know that science is actually simple. Science, in the end, just means a critical look with a process. It's a system to maintain critical footing or stop being on critical footing, right? And in general, science will teach you that it's usually right to be on the critical footing because you get very little instances where cause and effect is real, right? Where science is able to actually prove things in a simple mathematical way. Usually there's all kinds of nuance, right? And the nuance can't really get systematized and intellectualized by science. It doesn't work that way, right? All right, thanks, Justin. Great episode. Happy white paper. Indeed, happy white paper day, everyone. Enjoy it. Read the paper, even if it's just the abstract. The abstract itself is a work of art and beauty. So thank you, Satoshi. We're happy. We do not have broken brains because of you. We appreciate it.